We're reciting Dua Nudba on our behalf, our family members, the community, mu'mineen who are in need of dua, kurbatan ilallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin Nabiyyihi wa alihi wa sallama taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma lakal hamdu ala ma jara bihi qada'uka fi awliyaik الذين استخلصتهم لنفسك ودينك إذ اخترت لهم جزيل ما عندك من النعيم المقيم الذي لا زوال له ولا إذمحلال بعد أن شرطت عليهم زهدا في درجات هذه الدنيا الدنية وزخرفها وزبرجها فشرطوا لك ذلك وعلمت منهم الوفاء به فقبلتهم وقربتهم وقدمت لهم الذكر العلي والثناء الجلي وأهبطت عليهم ملائكتك وكرمتهم بوحيك ورفدتهم بعلمك وجعلتهم الذريعة إليك والوسيلة إلى رضوانك فبعض أسكنته جنتك إلى أن أخرجته منها وبعض حملته في فلقك ونجيته ومن آمن معه من الهلكة برحمتك وبعض اتخذته لنفسك خليلا وسألك لسان صدق في الآخرين فأعجبته وجعلت ذلك عليا وبعض كلمته من شجرة تكليما وجعلت له من أخيه ردءا ووزيرا وبعض أولدته من غير أب وآتيته البينات وأيدته بروح القدس وكل شرعت له شريعة ونهجت له منهاجا وتخيرت له أوصياء مستحفظان بعد مستحفظ من مدة إلى مدة إقامة لدينك وحجة على عبادك ولئلا يزول الحق عن مقره ويغلب الباطل على أهله ولا يكون أحد لولا أرسلت إلينا رسولا منذرا وأقمت لنا علما هاديا فنتبع آيتك من قبل أن نضل ونخزى إلى أن انتهيت بالأمر إلى حبيبك ونجيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وآله فكان كما انتجبته سيد من خلقته وصفوة من استفيته وأفضل من اجتبيته وأكرم من اعتمدته قدمته على أنبيائك وبعثته إلى الثقلين من عبادك وأوتعته مشاركك ومغاربك وسخرت له البراق وأرجت بروحه إلى السمائك وأودعته علم ما كان وما يكون إلى انقضاء خلقك ثم نصرته بالرعب وحففته بجبرائيل وميكائيل والمسومين من ملائكتك ووعدته أن تظهر دينه على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون وذلك بعد أن بوأته مبوأ صدق من أهله وجعلت له ولهم أول بيت مذع للناس للذي ببكة مباركا وهدى للعالمين فيه آيات بينات مقام إبراهيم ومن دخله كان آمنا وقلت إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد ثم جعلت أجر محمد صلواتك عليه وآله مودتهم في كتابك فقلت كن لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى وقلت ما سألتكم من أجر فهو لكم وقلت ما أسألكم عليه من أجر إلا من شاء أن يتخذ إلى ربه سبيلا فكانوا هم السبيل إليك والمسلك إلى رضوانك فلما أنقضت أيامه أقام وليه علي بن أبي طالب صلواتك عليهما وآلهما هاديا إذ كان هو المنذر ولكل قوم هاد فقال والملأ أمامه من كنت مولاه فعلي مولاه اللهم وال من والاه وعاد من عاداه وانصر من نصر واخذل من خذله وقال من كنت أنا نبيه فعلي أميره وقال أنا وعلي من شجرة واحدة وسائر الناس من شجر شتى وأحله محل هارون من موسى فقال له أنت مني بمنزلة هارون من موسى إلا أنه لا نبي بعدي وزوجه ابنته سيدة النساء العالمين وحل له من مسجده ما حلل وسد الأبواب إلا بابه ثم أودعه علمه وحكمته فقال أنا مدينة العلم وعلي بابها فمن أراد المدينة فليأتها من بابها. ثم قال: أنت أخي ووسي ووارثي، لحمك من لحمي ودمك من دمي، وسلمك سلمي وحربك حربي، والإيمان مخالة لحمك ودمك كما خالة لحمي ودمي. وأنت غدا على الحوض خليفتي، وأنت تقضي ديني وتنجز عداتي، وشيعتك على منابر من نور مبيضة وجوههم حولي في الجنة وهم جيراني. ولولا أنت يا علي لم يعرف المؤمنون بعدي، وكان بعده هدى من الضلال ونورا من العمى وحبل الله المتين وصراطه المستقيم، لا يسبق بقرابة في رحم ولا بسابقة في الدين، ولا يلحق في منكبة من مناقبه، يحذو حظب الرسول صلى الله عليهما وآلهما، ويقاتل على التأويل ولا تأخذه في الله لومة لائم، قد وتر فيه سناديد العرب وقتل أبطالهم وناوش ذعبانهم، فعودع قلوبهم أحقادا بدرية وخيبرية وهنينية وغيرهن، فضبت على عداوته وأكبت على منابذته، حتى قتل الناكثين والقاستين والمارقين. ولما قضى نحبه وقتله أشكى الآخرين يتبع أشكى الأولين، لم يمتثل أمر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله في الحادين بعد الحادين، والأمة مصرة على مقته مجتمعة على قتيئة الرحم وإقصاء بلده إلا القليل ممن وفى لرعاية الحق فيهم، فقتل من قتل وسبي من سبي وأقصي من أقصي، وجرى القضاء لهم بما يرجى له حسن المثوبة، إذ كانت الأرض لله يورثها من يشاء من عباده، والعاقبة للمتقين. وسبحان ربنا إن كان وعد ربنا لمفعوله، ولن يخلف الله وعده وهو العزيز الحكيم. فعلى العتائب من أهل بيت محمد وعلي صلى الله عليهما وآلهما فليبكي الباكون، وإياهم فليندب النادبون، ولمثلهم فلتذرف الدموع، وليصرخ الصارخون، ويضج الضاجون، ويعج العاجون. أين الحسن أين الحسين، أين أبناء الحسين، صالح بعد الصالح وصادق بعد الصادق، أين السبيل بعد السبيل، أين الخيرة بعد الخيرة، أين شموس طالعة، أين الأقمار المنيرة، أين أنجم الزاهرة، أين أعلام الدين وقواعد العلم، أين بقية الله التي لا تخلو من الإترة الهادية، أين معد لقطع دابر الظلمة، أين المنتظر لإقامة العمت والعوج، أين المرتجى لإزالة الجور والعدوان، أين المدخر لتجديد الفرائض والسنن، أين المتخير لإعادة الملة والشريعة، أين مؤمل لإحياء الكتاب وحدوده، أين محيي معالم الدين وأهله، أين قاسم شوقة المعتدين، أين هادم أبنية الشرك والنفاق، أين مبيد أهل الفسوق والإسيان والطغيان، أين حاسد فروع الغي والشقاق، أين طامس آثار الزيغ والأهواء، أين قاطئ حبائل الكذب والافتراء، أين المبيد العتاة والمرضى، أين المستأصل الأهل العناد والتضليل والإلحاد، أين معز الأولياء ومضل الأعداء، أين جامع الكلمة على التقوى، أين باب الله الذي منه يؤتى، أين وجه الله الذي إليه يتوجه الأولياء، أين السبب المتصل بين الأرض والسماء، أين صاحب يوم الفتح وناشر الراية الهدى، أين مؤلف شمل الصلاح والرضا، أين طالب بذهول الأنبياء وأبناء الأنبياء، أين طالب بدم المقتول بكربلاء، أين المنصور على من اعتدى عليه وافترى، أين المضطر الذي يجاب إذا دعا، أين الصدر الخلائق ذو البر والتقوى، أين ابن النبي المصطفى وابن علي المرتضى وابن خديجة الغراء وابن فاطمة الكبرى. بأبي أنت وأمي ونفسي لك الوقاء والحماء، يا ابن السادة المقربين، يا ابن النجباء الأكرمين، يا ابن الهداة المهديين، يا ابن الخيرة المحذبين، يا ابن الغطارفة الأنجبين، يا ابن الطيب المطهرين، يا ابن الخضارمة المنتجبين، يا ابن القماقمة الأكرمين، يا ابن البذور المنيرة، يا ابن السرج المضيئة، يا ابن الشهم الثاقبة، يا ابن العنجم الزاهرة، يا ابن السبل الواضحة، يا ابن الأعلام اللائحة، يا ابن العلوم الكاملة، يا ابن السنن المشهورة، يا ابن المعالم المعثورة، يا ابن المعجزات الموجودة، يا ابن الدلائل المشهودة، يا ابن الصراط المستقيم، يا ابن النبأ العظيم، يا ابن من هو في أم الكتاب لدى الله علي حكيم، يا ابن الآيات والبينات، يا ابن الدلائل الظاهرات، يا ابن البراهين الواضحات الباهرات، يا ابن الحجج البالغات، يا ابن النعم السابغات، يا ابن طه والمحكمات، يا ابن ياسين والضاريات، يا ابن تور والعاديات، يا ابن من دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين أو أدنى دنوا واقترابا من العلي الأعلى. ليت شعري أين استقرت بك النوى، بل أي أرض تقلك أو ثرى، أبي رضوى أو غيرها أم ذي توى. عزيز علي نرى الخلق ولا ترى، ولا أسمع لك حسيسا ولا نجوى. عزيز علي أن تحيط بك دوني البلوى، ولا ينالك مني ضجيجا ولا شكوى. بنفسي أنت من مغيب لم يخلو منا، بنفسي أنت من نازه ما نزح عنا. بنفسي أنت أمنية الشائق يتمنى، من مؤمن ومؤمنة ذكر فحنا. بنفسي أنت من عقيد إز لا يسامى، بنفسي أنت من أثيل مجد لا يجارى. بنفسي أنت من تلاد نعم لا تضاهى، بنفسي أنت من نسيف شرف لا يساوى. إلى متى أحار فيك يا مولاي، وإلى متى، وأي خطاب أسف فيك، وأي نجوى. عزيز علي أن أجاب دونك وأناغى، عزيز علي أن أبكيك ويخذلك الورى. عزيز علي أن يجري عليك دونهم ما جرى. هل من معين فأطيل معه العويل والبكاء، هل من جزوع فأساعد جزعه إذا خلا. هل قضيت عين فساعدتها عيني على القضاء، هل إليك يا ابن أحمد سبيل فتلقى. هل يتصل يومنا منك بغده فنحظى، متى نرد مناهلك الروية فنروى. متى ننتقئ من عذب مائك فقد طال الصدى، متى نغاديك ونراوحك فنقر عينا. متى ترانا نراك وقد نشرت اللواء النسر الترى، أترانا نحف بك وأنت تؤم الملأ، وقد ملأت الأرض عدلا وأذقت أعداءك هوانا وإقابا. وأبرت العتاة وجحدت الحق وقطعت دابر المتكبرين، واجتثثت أصول الظالمين. ونحن نقول الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم أنت كشاف الكرب والبلوى، وإليك أستعدي فعندك العدوى. وأنت رب الآخرة والأولى، فأغث يا غياث المستغيثين عبيدك المبتلى. وأره سيده يا شديد القوى، وعزل عنه به العسى والجوى. وبرد غليله يا من على العرش استوى، ومن إليه رجع والمنتهى. اللهم ونحن عبيدك التائقون إلى وليك المذكر بك وبنبيك، خلقته لنا عصمة وملاذا، وأقمته لنا قواما ومآذا، وجعلته للمؤمنين منا إماما، فبلغه منا تحية والسلاما. وزدنا بذلك يا رب إكراما، واجعل مستقره لنا مستقرا ومقاما. وأتمم نعمتك بتقديمك إياه أمامنا، حتى توردنا جنانك ومرافقة الشهداء من خلصائك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد، وصل على محمد جده رسولك السيد الأكبر، وعلى علي أبيه سيد الأصغر، وجدته الصديقة الكبرى فاطمة بنت محمد، وعلى من استفيت من آبائه البررة، وعليه أفضل وأكمل وأتم وأدوم وأكثر وأوفر ما صليت على أحد من أسفيائك وخيرتك من خلقك. وصل عليه صلاة لا غاية لعددها ولا نهاية لمددها ولا نفاد لأمدها. اللهم وأقم به الحق وأدحض به الباطل وأدل به أولياءك واذلل به أعداك. وصل اللهم بيننا وبينه وصلة تؤدي إلى مرافقة السلفه، واجعلنا ممن يأخذ بحجتهم ويمكث في ذلهم، وأعنا على تعدية حقوقه إليه والاجتهاد في طاعته واجتناب معصيته، وامن علينا برضاه وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته ودعاءه وخيره ما ننال به سعة من رحمتك وفوزا عندك. واجعل صلاتنا به مقبولا وذنوبنا به مغفورا ودعاءنا به مستجابا، واجعل أرزاقنا به مبسوطا وهمومنا به مكفيا وحوائجنا به مقضيا. وأقبل إلينا بوجهك الكريم واقبل تقربنا إليك، وانظر إلينا نظرة رحيمة نستكمل بها الكرامة عندك، ثم لا تصرفها عنا بجودك. واسقنا من حوض جده صلى الله عليه وآله بكأسه وبيده ريان رويا هنيئا سائغا لا ظمأ بعده يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. Again, from amongst the mustahabbat is the 2 rakat salat, dua nudbah for qada al-hajat kurbatan Allah.
لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. توكلت على الحي الذي لا يموت، والحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله جل جلاله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله جل جلاله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. اللهم صل على. أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين عليا ولي الله صلوات الله وسلامه. أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين عليا حجة الله. الله السلام. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Amma ba'd. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My congratulations to you on this auspicious day, the occasion of Friday, a day of Eid for the Mu'mineen, and a day in which, alhamdulillah, we are blessed to continue learning lessons and discussing the Holy Quran. We've been discussing the chapter of Surah Nuh, the 71st chapter of the Holy Quran, in which we've reached the 17th verse of discourse, in which Nabi Nuh, as he guides and instructs the people, he gives them the explanation of how Allah approaches them by saying, وَاللَّهُ أَنْبَتَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ نَبَاتًا. The 17th verse of this holy surah translates to Allah made you grow from the earth with a plant-like or vegetable-like growth. The kalima Wallahu ambatakum nabatan is used for the growth, used for vegetables and plants that namu, that grow from the earth. Nabatakum min al-ardi, ambatakum min al-ardi nabata. That it is a growth from the earth that you are a growth that comes from the earth. The Mufassirin have provided a variety of different explanations for this term as it's described in the Quran, why Allah chose these particular terms that He did of using nabat, ambatakum, nabata. One explanation says that everything that humanity needs comes from the earth, whether directly like plants and vegetables or indirectly like meat and animals, that all benefit from the earth, and therefore Allah is saying that the life of a human being is entirely reliant upon that which comes from this planet. Hence Allah says, ambatakum nabata. Another explanation says that the truth of man, that he was made from sulalatin min teen, that he was made from an amount of clay that was taken to bring him into existence, refers back to the origination of man, of saying that you yourself, O humanity, I have fashioned from the clay of this earth, therefore you are something that has grown from the earth and been established on this earth for its entirety and its complexity. Some contemporary or historical mufassirin of the past 50 years or so came up with a third interpretation for this, which is somewhat questionable in its understanding. However, it's fair to share as a point of discussion. That amongst the mufassirin was the opinion to say that ambatakum nabata, that we made you grow from this earth with a vegetable-like growth. A vegetable's growth is something gradual and progressive that comes from an entire process of a seed being sown in the ground, and then gradually it transforms into the process of being what is a plant. Therefore, some Mufassirin use this to point to the idea that there is some relationship to the evolutionary theory that is tied to this statement. That the same way that, for example, the materials that exist on the earth, Allah made those materials on this earth fashion and grow into the reality of what is a human being in our contemporary times. Now, this is a theory, and it's an opinion of some Mufassirin. It does not in any way promote or condone and authenticate the concept of an evolutionary theory. The reason that we make the statement that it doesn't necessarily tie to an evolutionary theory is because in the Quran at the same point in time Allah describes humanity, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَاكُمْ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that certainly we created you in the best of forms. When Allah describes humanity being created in the best of forms, this description teaches us and tells us that humanity and insan, as what is known as insan, was from the moment it was established in the form of insan. Hence being the case that an idea of an evolutionary theory that at one point in time it was something completely different and then it became something completely different, or it gradually became from something that's an inanimate object to an animate object, becomes difficult for us to understand. The opinion of why Mufassirin, why some would mention that this is associated with a discussion around evolution, could be the influence of contemporary times. Could be looking for people to tie a relationship between the Quran and whatever the current opinion of science is. It's possible. However, within its reality, we see that that interpretation doesn't necessarily coordinate with some of the other statements within the Quran. When Allah describes and He says that He sent down Adam alayhi salam, فَأَحْبِتُ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ, that Adam was sent to this earth. It was Adam in his completion that was sent to this earth, not the concept of Adam that was sent to this earth. Meaning that Adam's existence on this earth was not a consequence of, for example, other actions becoming Adam and then being sent somewhere else, but rather it was something that from its initiation. Which is why, even when we take a look at the evolutionary theory that's discussed of the gradual conversion of man, there are what's called the missing links that don't describe how that which existed on this earth became that which exists on this earth today. Which validates the process of Allah saying, فَأَحْبِتُ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ, that he was sent down to earth, and that you would be sent down to earth in the shape of Adam. Hence this idea that, for example, that the statement وَاللَّهُ أَنْبَتَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ نَبَاتًا, that this idea that Allah saying that Allah made you grow from the earth with a vegetable-like growth doesn't necessarily imply or agree with the concept of evolutionary theory, and the fact that some mufassirin point to it doesn't in essence validate this theory for us, nor is it something that we insist to be a validation of this theory. Rather, what we say is that some have looked at the teachings of the Quran and come with different explanations. Doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with them, but that we allow this to exist within the realm of possibility, and we leave the affair at that. Not everything that we come across in the Quran we need to be able to validate as 100% this or 100% that. That there are things that are outside of the knowledge of humanity, and for us to accept that there are things outside of the knowledge of humanity is appropriate. There should never be an insistence to say, no, that this is what it has to mean. Why? Because we know within the Quran, Allah has in many places refused to let humanity know the intention of Allah's speech, on purpose. When we refer to huruf al-muqatta'at, the separated letters that are recited, alif lam mim, alif lam ra, kaf ha ya ain sad, these letters, Allah insisted that we don't know what they mean, to show that no matter how far humanity advances, the knowledge of Allah will always be above the knowledge of humanity, and that humanity will never be able to encompass the entirety of the meaning of Allah's words. So hence, when we see something that has a different interpretation, we don't have to prove it wrong, we don't have to prove it right. We can simply allow it to exist in the realm of possibility. This conversation continues, where Allah in the 17th verse mentions that He says, and He made you grow from the earth with a vegetable-like growth. ثُمَّ يُعِيدُكُمْ فِيهَا وَيُخْرِجُكُمْ إِخْرَاجًا. In the 18th verse, Allah continues this conversation, and then He says, then He makes you return to it, and He will bring you forth without fail. This description describes, in these two verses, the 17th and 18th verses, describes the creation of man as coming from this earth, and at death being returned to this earth, and again at a later point in time being taken out of the earth again. This series of humanity's creation and knowing the cycle of life is not something that is only mentioned in here. Rather, in a very famous verse of Surah Taha, verse number 55, Allah again points to this reality. Minha khalaqnakum wa fiha nu'idukum wa minha nukhrijukum taratan ukhra. In Surah Taha, verse number 55, Allah says, from it we created you, and into it we shall send you back, and from it we will raise you a second time. This verse in particular, and its description that Allah is describing in Surah Nuh as well too, that we made you come from this earth, and then we will take you back to it, and then that you will come out of it, وَيَخْرُجُكُمْ إِخْرَاجًا, and that you will come out of it again, is an important discussion of humanity to understand our life cycle, and to understand what the reality of our existence is, that this existence is temporary. This concept of understanding that our existence is temporary is so significant that even at the time of death, from the mustahabbat and the recommended actions, when we go to the graveyard, one of the things is when we go to bury the deceased, it is mustahab for everyone other than the family to put dirt into the grave with the back of their hand. And as you perform this action, it is this verse that you recite, وَمِنْهَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ وَفِيهَا نُعِيدُكُمْ وَمِنْهَا نُخْرِجُكُمْ تَارَةً أُخْرَى. That Allah is inviting us to remember in that action of placing dirt in the grave, that this dirt that you are placing in this grave, this is what you were made from. مِنْهَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ وَفِيهَا نُعِيدُكُمْ. And now you are going back into this soil that you came from. وَمِنْهَا نُخْرِجُكُمْ تَارَةً أُخْرَى. And at another point in time, oh man, bear witness that the same dirt that you are going into, you will come out of. This life cycle and its understanding is very important for us to keep focused upon, which is why Allah mentions it over and over again. Its inclusion in the discussion in Surah Nuh is not out of place. Rather, we see the reason it's included in Surah Nuh is the advices that Nabi Nuh alayhi salam gives to his nation. What are you proud of? What are you doing? This earth is what you came from, and this earth you will go back to. How can you imagine that you have an amount of might and status above it, and that there is not a creator that you have to answer to for the actions that you take? In reference to this philosophy of understanding that you came from this earth, to it you will return, and from it you will be taken out again, is one of the points of philosophy that is mentioned in the ahadith that are attributed to our master Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. In reference to this philosophy, you were created from it, and to it you will be returned, and you will be brought out again. A hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen is what teaches us that he says, when you look at the philosophy of salat, and you look at the concept of salat, look at the idea that when you go to your first prostration and you raise yourself up, it is that Allah has taken you out of the dirt and made you into a creation. And the reality that you will go back into sajda for the second time is that you will die, and that this life is temporary and it's only a small pause. And when you go back to this earth is when this death shall take place and this life will end. And when you rise from that second sajda, that rising is the rising of the day of judgment, after which there is no death again. And this philosophy that Imam Ali teaches about this concept is important for us to again realize the reality of what this life is and what this experience is that we possess, that it's a temporary experience that we have for a small period of time. Hence Allah again, looking at the people of Nuh who are obstinate and refuse to obey and refuse to worship, reminds them again, ثُمَّ يُعِيدُكُمْ فِيهَا, and that you will be sent back to this earth, وَيُخْرِجُكُمْ إِخْرَاجًا, and that He will bring you forth from it, إِخْرَاجًا, without fail, that you will have no control over that matter. This discussion Allah points to, and then He continues His conversation, verse 19, وَاللَّهُ جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ بِسَاطًا لِتَسْلُكُوا مِنْهَا سُبُلٌ فِجَاجًا. These two verses, verses 19 and 20, Allah makes the statement, He says, Allah has made the earth a vast expanse for you. That this earth has been spread for you and made comfortable for you. لِتَسْلُكُوا مِنْهَا سُبُلٌ فِجَاجًا, so that you may travel over its spacious ways. This proof that Allah presents describes and says that the land of the earth was not so hard that it would be impossible for man to traverse it, or so difficult that man could not get over it, nor was it so soft that he would be quagmired and unable to move forward. Allah describes and He says, I created things in a perfect balance intended for you, that you possess the abilities to be able to make this earth your home. Allah is saying that I did that for you, then why do you refuse to acknowledge my status? This subulun fijaja that Allah describes and He says, so you may travel over it in spacious ways. Spacious in ways. Subulun fijaja. That there are two descriptions that says subulun is an adjective that refers to the traversing over flat land, that Allah made it easy for you to walk over its vast expanses. And fijaja is an adjective that describes that traveling over the mountains, that there are ways through them. To describe and say that that flat land is such that it doesn't prevent you, or it doesn't become difficult for you to travel over this flat land because of its flat nature or softness in nature. And that mountains in their heights and their peaks, that they contain fijaja and they contain passes, is to say that even the mightiest of mountains, man has the ability to traverse through and to find locations within them to be peaceful and to utilize this earth as Allah intended for us. Here Allah finishes His series of proofs on humanity of saying, acknowledge me as your creator. When the people of Nuh refused to acknowledge Allah, Allah first gave them dala'il. He gave them proofs of saying, look upon my creation, look upon what I invented for you to believe in me and to follow my rules and to follow my commands. And when humanity refused is when we see the conversation of Nabi Nuh now turn back to Allah. And in the 21st verse he says, قَالَ نُوحٌ رَبِّي إِنَّهُمْ عَصَوْنِي وَاتَّبَعُوا مَنْ لَمْ يَزِدْهُ مَالُهُ وَوَلَدُهُ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. Nuh alayhi salam, upon presenting all of these proofs, and remember, Nuh preached to his people for 950 years. Preached to them. Not that he lived amongst them, his life was much longer. But after 950 years where these proofs were not presented once, they were presented over and over and over again. The significance of recognizing this and Allah presenting Nabi Nuh as an example for us is that never imagine, I told them once, they didn't listen, let them suffer the consequences. It's not what Allah wants from us, that once and the hujjah is complete upon them. No, over and over again. If Allah wants Nuh to preach for 950 years before a punishment is sent down, He wants us to repeat the message until we're blue in the face. Meaning that we can't preach the message enough, so much so that we would exceed Nuh alayhi salam in his preaching. Therefore, don't give up on people that though they may not listen, repeat and repeat and repeat. If it is appropriate for a nation to be repeated to for 950 years before they're punished, for us to spend a year, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, 40 years of presenting the truth, it doesn't mean that we should get tired of presenting that truth, but rather we should be consistent in its approach. But Nuh alayhi salam says, my Lord, they have disobeyed me, and they are following someone whose wealth and children only add to his loss. This statement of Nabi Nuh gives us a description of what the people of that time were like. They didn't use their intellect, they used what was apparent in front of them, and they never were thoughtful about their approach. Meaning that the people that they looked up to were those who had material wealth and material prosperity, and they found this to be sufficient to be leaders in authority over them as opposed to paying attention to the message. Same is true for us today. That when we look to see who will be our role models, who will be our children's role models, who will be the leaders in society, we see that society at large has decided that wealth and prosperity are the signs of success and those should be the leaders. That instead, us as mu'mineen should take the lesson that Allah is teaching us and say, don't look at prosperity and wealth, rather look at piety and character and attachment to the divine creator to find your authority on this earth. And Nabi Nuh's complaint is exactly that we would complain today and say that society at large has decided that people with money should be the ones that are our example to follow. People with authority and power in this world are the ones that should be our example to follow. And Nabi Nuh alayhi salam is preaching to us, and we are preaching to this nation to say that no, rather look to the one who represents the relationship with Allah and piety regardless of worldly and material success. There were Anbiya who had many children, like Yaqub alayhi salam. And then there were Anbiya who did not have any children or had maybe one child, like Zakaria alayhi salam. He was only given Yahya in his old age and the end of his life. Should one look at a person who only has one son and say that, oh, this isn't a valid leader for me? We would argue and say that at that moment, and the same argument could be made about our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the people did make that argument against our Prophet, which is why the revelation of Surah Kawthar was so significant. That the people accused our Prophet of having no status and no children and called him abtar. And Allah is the one who says in the end, Inna sha'niyaka huwal abtar, that those who come against you will be the ones who are abtar. This description of paying attention to not looking at material wealth and looking at them as our people to look forward to, we see this all the time these days, right? 7 successful habits of every billionaire. How does Jeff Bezos start his day? What does Elon Musk do in his free time? Why do these things exist? They exist to teach us to look up to these people and say that their wealth is a reason that they should be in authority over us. But Islam says don't be lost by this. Don't focus on this. Instead, look at the examples of Ahlul Bayt. Go and learn the lesson of how Imam Ali would start his day. Go and take a look at how Imam Rada was use his time. Go and look at how our Prophet would spend his time. Though they had wealth or not, it's not relevant. Their piety is what we want to take a look at. And that's what Nuh's complaint is that this nation only chases after those whose wealth and children don't benefit them. And Allah then continues, وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا كُبَّارًا. That this verse, 22nd verse, and they have devised an outrageous plot against Allah. There are two various opinions that come, or a few various opinions. Some that say that this is, for example, the idea that they intended to kill Nabi Nuh, and that was their plot against him. Others who say that they plotted against the religion of Allah to destroy it. Some Mufassirin came with a third point that describes one of the realities of the time of Nabi Nuh, that says that from the time of Adam alayhi salam to Nuh, what had happened was that people who were pious were looked up to in that time. And when they would die, the people of that time would make statues of these pious people to remind them of the character, of the goodness that these people embodied in their life, that after them that should continue. But as time passed, people forgot why these statues were created, why these statues existed, and those with power and wealth made a plot to take these pious people and say that, oh, these statues were made because they were the gods of your forefathers and you should worship them. And they introduced the concept of idolatry in the time of Nabi Nuh, and they furthered the concept of idolatry by saying that, oh, there is only these are your gods and these are who you were born to worship. That's why these statues remain amongst you. Hence, some Mufassirin describe and say that when it says وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا كُبَّارًا, that they made an outrageous plot against Allah, was they made the outrageous plot of introducing idolatry or reintroducing idolatry amongst the people of that time, so as to take them away from the true religion of Allah and be able to manipulate them by creating false gods amongst themselves. And that this plotting is what the consequence was that Allah sent His punishment. Inshallah, we'll continue this discussion next week to talk about what proceeds in this surah and see the punishment of Allah as He describes it Himself for the aspect of idolatry. We ask Allah again by the rights of this day, by the rights of the Hadirin Ghaibin, that, Oh Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Oh Allah, keep us on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, protect us from misguidance and from idolatry and from the sins of following those who are not worthy of being followed. Oh Allah, give us tawfiq to stay attached to the Quran. Ya Allah, by the rights of the Quran, fulfill our hajat and keep our children on the upright path. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل وسلم على أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، والحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة، وعلي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي باقر علم النبيين، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي الجواد، وعلي بن محمد الهادي، والحسن بن علي الأسكري، وحجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهوره وجعلنا من أعوانه والأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات، تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات، إنك مجيب الدعوات، إنك على كل شيء قدير. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. I enjoin upon you and myself to have fear and piety of Allah. Briefly, and this is intended as an educational discussion because of misinformation, and to discuss what our situation needs to be in the current contemporary environment that we see in the world. What's going on in the world right now and the acts of aggression that are taking place between various nations are very frightening for the condition of the world and for humanity at large of what people are doing. But there's some elements of information that are missing to us that we don't know, and we're given a narrative that isn't accurate. And the consequence of that is that we wind up in a position where we can't actually talk about, we are given limited access. And let me explain why. There's a conversation that says that why is, and I'm going to be very blunt about this, why is Iran getting involved in this conflict? And the narrative that we're told, it's because Iran holds extreme animosity against Israel. And that their goal, na'uzubillah, is to, for example, wipe out this country. This is all misinformation. And it's intentionally not told to us what their intention is, so that when aggression is performed against that country, it can be justified to say that, oh, well, their intention is to create genocide, so therefore we have to stop them. But the reality is that Iran's mission, what it's talked about entirely, when it says what it looks at in the Middle East and what it looks at in the areas of Palestine and Israel, and what its intention is that its intention, it says that all we want is that for a democratic nation to be established that is representative of all the people that live in that environment. We're not asking to destroy any nation, we're not asking to remove any people from this place, but rather that if all of these people are to live here, let them equally create a government of representation. Now the reason that, for example, you're never told what their intention is and you're always shown them in a vilified picture is that the only person who suffers the consequence of this agenda is the apartheid government that sits in place right now. And those who support this government are those who have the same problem as what such a restrictive government has. That those monarchies and oligarchies that are controlling a nation and not creating a representative government are the ones who hate this agenda and are today now siding against their faith with a nation that's at war with Muslimin. Because the entire purpose is that to keep those people who have taken power and sequestered it amongst themselves, to keep it amongst themselves and not allow for equity or reasonable treatment to exist within people. So which is why when, for example, the message in media shows us and says that these people are intending to commit genocide and they want to kill all of these people and they want to do all these abusive actions, that's not what that nation is actually proselytizing within itself and without of itself. But you're not allowed to hear that. They've designed snippets of information to give you a particular narrative that justifies any aggression that an oligarchy wants to take against another country. Which is why you even saw that all of those sultanates and monarchies that exist in the Middle East are supporting an oppressive regime with the interest that if that oppressive regime falls, then it could cause their governments to topple as well too. Now, understanding all of this doesn't mean that, for example, we go out and we become narrators of this narrative, because at this point in time in the country, the culture, the environment we live in, there is a danger of extreme repercussions for the idea of supporting the truth or even presenting a true narrative. One of the things in the city of New York, this has been happening right now, that students who stood up against this process in Columbia University have been physically attacked, removed from the university, and their property has been destroyed and considered sacrosanct, much the same way in the start of Islam, that if you didn't support those who were in a position of power, your property was considered sacrosanct and it was considered to be open. In this kind of a situation, in the community that we live in, the guidance that we want to look for comes back to the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And this narration is from amongst the short sayings of Imam Ali, where he says, "Kun fil fitnati k'ibn al-labun, la dhahra fayurqaba, wa la dhar'un fayuhlaba." Imam Ali would describe, and he says that during times of fitna and disturbance and conflict and strife, be like the adolescent camel. Ibn al-labun is the child of a camel that produces milk. So Laboon is the camel that produces milk. Ibn al-Laboon is the one that is nursing from its mother and is receiving milk from its mother. And he explains and he says, what do I mean by this? La dhahara ayyarqabu biha. So it has neither a back that is strong enough that you can put weight upon it and carry goods on it, nor does it have udders that it can be milked and other benefit can be taken from it. This description of Imam Ali was to describe a camel that is the age of 2 years. At the age of 2 years, a camel looks appropriate, looks pretty big, but it's not strong enough to carry anything. Meaning that an oppressor can't utilize this as a vehicle to further their agenda. Nor does it have any milk to give that, for example, okay, if I can't use it for weight, at least I can take some benefit from it. So Imam Ali says, if you find yourself in a situation where the fitna and the strife of the time is such that it's extreme and it prevents you from being able to stand up, or it prevents you from being able to go out and speak for the truth, then don't support anyone. Be like that which no benefit can be taken from in this situation. Let's stay in a situation or protect yourself in such a situation that you're not promoting anyone that does harm, and you're not adding to their value by being present in that environment. And that means we have obligations in this time to be able to be active and to be able to be conscious of both our purchasing power and our voices. Of what do we say in this environment? What do our votes mean in this environment? Who do we supply our wealth to? Who do we do business transactions with? So as that they're not taking our wealth, as the way a camel's milk is taken, to go out and do harm to other people with it. That it's not our opinion that they're utilizing to go and then go to raise armies against people who are standing up for truth. This is something we have to do, as well as be well educated. That when a false narrative comes in front of us that is used to justify acts of aggression in the world, at least we've done some research to know what's the true narrative. What's the reality? Maybe we can't use it to convince someone else, but at least we won't be convinced of something false. Hence this aspect of education of what's the reality? What are people actually fighting for? What's going on is something we should take time to learn about. And that those of us that can do more, there are people in this country that are doing more. And they're doing more in a very tactful and appreciative manner that we can either support or at least become well aware of. Namely, for example, there's an organization that exists called the National War Tax Resistance Coordinating Committee, NWTRCC. This organization is of regular Americans who just came to the conclusion and said, we don't really want our money to be used for wartime support. And they said that we will look at the tax code and we will look at different opportunities that we have to legally, and they'll explain to you the consequences of your decision, and they'll show you all of the different ways that you can go out and abstain from the aspect of the money that we produce in this country and pays taxes being utilized to cause harm in the world. In general, bar none, not specific to one incident or another, but to say that our money should be used for local interests, for our people, for our government, for our social services. And organizations like this will teach you not one, but a variety of different techniques that we can utilize if we have the confidence to go through it, as well as educate you on the confidence and resources that you need of what are the consequences of the decisions that you make and what to do in that situation. Hence, this time, the least we need to do is follow the example of Imam Ali. Be conscious of what we spend and where we spend it. Be conscious of what we say and where we say it. And be conscious of the truth and the reality that's going on in the world, so that we can not be seen amongst those who fight against justice, who fight for oppression. And the reality of the oppression that's going on in the world is something that the entire world is waking up to right now. And they're saying that not genocide in my name, not apartheid in my name, not abuse in my name, and not killing of innocents in my name. And those are all lines that us as mu'mineen stand by firmly. And that whoever executes it in this way, we will always stand against that person. Whether it was in Myanmar and what was going on there, whether it's in this country now and what's going on here, whether it was in South Africa and what happened there, our position will always be with justice and with truth. We ask Allah again by the right of this day, by the right of the Hadirin Ghaibin, that, oh Allah, forgive our sins, cover our flaws. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Oh Allah, this is the day of Friday. By the right of this day, we have gathered here with hajat. Fulfill the hajat of the mu'mineen. Oh Allah, there are those amongst our families and communities and the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness and disease. Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, there are those who are suffering through difficulty and strife and insecurity. Ya Allah, give aman to the mu'mineen and muslimeen wherever they are in this world. Oh Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Entitle us to the ziyarat of Aba Abdullah in this world and the shafa of Aba Abdullah in the hereafter. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkar wal baghi ya'idukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Sadaqallahu al-'aliyyul 'azim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم